friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ugo if you're new here, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching from. So I'm sure you've seen the thumbnail, and yes, we're starting a new series. It's called The Body, Soul and Spirit to BSS. So this series is really important because, the Lord has been putting it in my heart for the longest time now. So this does not cancel the podcast, the Godly Halak podcast. That is still on full, process, and we're still going to be doing that. But then we are going to do the series, which is going to be apart from it. The Godly Halak podcast deals majorly on just the spirit part, especially for people who are on the journey, journey with God, who are on that journey and might be a bit confused as to things that are going on in their lives and need a bit of clarity around all of those things, right? So, but this series, right, is very important because, especially for young people, right, if we know or if you notice, I'm sure you've noticed that there's a massive, silent indoctrination happening right now, especially with young people. And this is through social media. Social media is one of the most powerful weapons that even the enemy is actually using and weaponizing, against kids and youth, right? There's all sorts of things happening there online, and people go there most times to, and without even knowing, some of these things that are actually being taught or spoken there are actually registered in the minds of people, which is indoctrinating them, right? So the Lord has been putting this in my mind, in my heart, right? So before now, when I used to be the youth president in my church, at that time, the youth were going through some things, right? And I had to pray to God and ask for clarity on how to, lead, right? When you lead in the secular world, it's easy for you to lead, but when you're leading in church, the Holy Spirit has to be the leader, has to show you how to navigate with, with people, because these are people's lives, and you will give account of the lives that I put in your charge. So at that time when I prayed, the Lord gave me a program that we ran for 12 months to a year. So it was titled The Life of a Godly Christian Youth at that time. So what we used to do, so every third Friday, we used to have a seminar where, we'll talk about everything that has to do with the life of a young person. So many questions they had, just things from relationships, sexual purity, personal hygiene. We'll talk about things like, networking, how to communicate with people, how to socialize, how to speak, how to dress modestly, how to, things, even awareness, talking about things in the medical, field, how to deal with trauma, how to deal with, crisis in the family front. So all of these things and more, right? We actually dealt with things that, stemming things like purpose as well, finding passion, work, career, how to balance your career with how to balance your, work, the difference between work and career and passion, just all of these good things. Right, and we had to even bring in experts. So nurses, doctors, they came and spoke in their field of expertise. And then we had financial experts as well come and speak to us about money, hustling and all of these things, how to, hustle culture. Is it good or is it bad? How do you balance all of these things? So yes, and most people, the thing about it is most people, tend to focus on their body, physical appearance. How am I smelling? How do I look? Am I fit? Which is good, right? But then they just focus only on the body, right? But then other people focus on, the spiritual aspect of their life, which is good too. And the most ignored, I notice, is the soul, But which is something that even shocks me, because everything everything happens in the soul, right? Everything, the soul is the intermediary between the body and the spirit, right? So if the soul is fractured, the life, the body, you literally see it playing out in the body, right? And then in the spirit. So it's very important, and that's the reason why we have very high rates of mental illness. All of these things, happiness, your feelings, anxiety, depressions, all of these things stem from the soul, an unhealthy soul. So we will talk about how to deal with, matters of the soul. So some people went through things, in their childhood that is still affecting them, till now, and they don't even know, because these things are stored in your subconscious and it plays out in your everyday life. That's the reason why we have things like identity confusion. You're having people being very depressed, people not knowing how to behave, how to, in the real world, right? So these are the things that we will be talking about, right? We will talk about even spiritual things, but we will not delve too much in the spiritual things. But everything we will talk about will be based on biblical principle, right? And all of this good stuff. So while I was brainstorming and praying about this, I spoke with my sister, one of my sisters, and she just she was frozen, and I'm like, why? What happened? It's not good. You don't think it was? She said, no. Like, this just shows that God cares. And I'm like, I don't understand. She's like, no, God cares. I'm like, yeah, God cares. And she's like, no, God cares. God sees me. So God is not even just concerned with my spiritual part. God is not just concerned with my, me coming to Him and just saying, God cares about my body. God cares about my soul. God cares that I'm in good health. God cares that I'm in, sound mind. And yes, right, God really cares. God sees us. And that's the reason why this is really important, especially now, right? Especially now. So, I feel like we should, focus. I feel like this is going to be very focused on the body, soul, and spirit, like I said earlier. And so it would be, coming to us weekly, and we will bring in experts like we used to do before, experts in their field. They will come here, we will sit with them, and then they will speak to us about their field and how to tackle issues pertaining their field as well. So, and then if you have questions, please, I'm very open to having questions, right? During this, during the series, we will talk about all things from, identity confusion. We will talk about purpose. We will talk about, mental struggles, emotional health. We will talk about, career, talk about finances. We will talk about, your body. We will talk about your body hygiene, health, lifestyle. We'll do all of that. Love, purity, relationship. We'll talk about family, boundaries. We'll talk about healing at home. We'll talk about, social life, community life, even life with regards to, in the digital, living life in this digital era, right? And, academics. We'll talk about personal growth, godly dating. We'll talk about, sexual brokenness, addiction, emotional neglect. We'll talk about, coping mechanisms. We'll talk about substance abuse, spiritual deconstruction, economic hardship. We'll talk about everything, migration, cultural, displacement, and all of these things. I think, leadership, activism, influence, right? All of these things, we will talk about them in depth, and then we'll have a holistic and see how God thinks about, certain things as well, right? God cares about us, cares about us in our entirety, so body, soul, and spirit. And for you to function properly as a human being, your body, your soul, and your spirit has to be in alignment. That's where you see, people being fulfilled. That's where fulfillment comes from. Sometimes you see people come to the apex of their life, where they have everything, right? But there's no fulfillment. You know why? Because, somewhere along their lives or something, there's no alignment between these three factors, right? So they might end up taking care of their bodies in good health, they are good with their money and all of those things, but somewhere their soul is fractured, right? There's fracture, there's trauma, there's something, lingering there. And then sometimes people take God out of that factor. No, I mean, God literally created us. Doing life aside God is just useless, because how do you do life aside? How does a phone, if it's faulty, how can it survive, or how can it be repaired without the manuals or the principles of the, production or the maker, right? So God has put even in the scriptures ways that we would be able to do life and do it properly, right? Even there's a chapter here that I really love, and I think buttresses this, very well, and that's the Gospel of St. John, the third epistle of John, which is verse 2. It says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in good health, even as thy soul prospereth." I mean, I don't think I would have written this better. That you prosper. God wants you to prosper and even be in good health, even as your soul prospers. You cannot prosper if your soul is actually in a state of confusion. So this is very important, especially if you are, a youth. I mean, everyone can watch this. Everyone can, listen to this. But yeah, if you're a youth, you definitely we want to stay tuned. So yes, please, if you haven't subscribed, I think you should subscribe. And then I think you should share this to people that you feel will be needing this, and like, comment, right? Bombard people with the link to all of this. And we will be back next week with a beautiful topic that I promise will enrich your soul. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I'll see you next week. Bye.